But we could find out pretty quickly that that's completely wrong. We really have no idea, and as the gates open, this is going to be some 3-3. Little unsurprising to see that on Gardens.
Yeah, and on Gardens, we actually did see a reasonable bit more of the DPS if they were going to get played, but to be honest, both the teams are very confident in this particular mirror matchup, so both teams are opting for it.
Can't say I disagree with it on either side of the fence here, but early move in from Global Esports. Nice stun and very quick conversion on Ken Mohororo. And that's really the one that's broken the camel's back there. Getting Anakin as well is just a bonus. Now you see a chunk of Jupiter know that it's all over. They have to take a dive, and a few more did end up losing their lives on the retreat. That's point to Global.
And Global Esports as well, just no fear in that. Instant challenge in by Sachok as well. Fighting Jupiter members out of position. Ken Mohororo dying very early is going to be quite costly because he's now behind in the energy challenge game and the ultimate challenge game as well. Both Ryans, however, are very far ahead. And interestingly enough, Samurai D is the leader.
Global really just rewarded for an aggressive move, so Jupiter going to try that shoe on, see how well it fits. Very quick approach to the point. Now they're in a bit of a pitched battle here as they make their move onto the point. That Earth Shadow, like you mentioned, is available. Oh, unfortunately goes out into a bunch of shields, gets nothing. Similar though on the side of Global Esports, Sachok does not connect. Now, actually, Ken Mohororo having overtaken Little Rags. It could be the grabs that seal this fight.
Yeah, no one's gone down yet either. Support ultimate's coming up online as well. Xenoflux notably has a Transcendence. He needs to counter Ken Mohororo.
Oh, he's actually held on to it. They managed to bait out the Transcendence, and now the grab comes out as that Transcendence is ending. But there's the counter grab from Little Rax. The windows are very marginal here. Self-destruct in from Ryu. Beautifully layered, just enough to pick up the two. And nice removal of Sachok's shield. Credit to Claire for that one. That is how you win a GOATS fight.
And this is a very long and drawn-out fight for both teams as well. Despite Global Esports now eventually losing this cap, they get a lot of progress on it because it took so long for both teams to get out all their ultimates. Huge investment on both sides, multitude of ults in there. Start out with the double Earth Shatters. No one hit that, but it's 62% in favor of Global Esports, and Sachok nearly has his second shatter.
That's going to be the real difference maker here, to say the least. Ken Mohororo does lead in grab charge, but not really close enough to it for it to be a factor this next fight, unless this next fight is quite a long one.
A good interception by Jupiter here, just make sure no one
gorgeous.
Can test.
Wow, that is the second major playmaking move Claire has made on this map in favor of Jupiter so far, and that one arguably even more impactful.
You see how quickly Jupiter went to the side as well. They knew which direction Global Esports wanted to rotate around, and every time you want to make the bridge rotation, you are taking the risk that there is going to be a Lucio, there is going to be a Diva, there's going to be someone that can knock you off the map and claim a bunch of environmental kills.
That's, like you said, always going to be the risk. It's also bought Ken Mohororo enough time for the grab to almost certainly come up in the course of this next fight. That's something they're going to critically need when you consider how much Global have to work with. Shatter available for Samurai D as well as the fight breaks out. Sachok is first in, but shields up against that self-destruct. Not enough to save Anakin, but now the grab out from Ken Mohororo, largely countered by Xenoflux, but they still fight Bubble Kitty. So, even Steven so far, as this self-destruct from Ryu does not find the connection. Now, both teams just in a pitch battle on the point.
A lot of low members on Jupiter, though. They need time to heal up. They are getting some counter trades, and Claire has the ultimate available.
Yeah, and also picking out Azure just really hampers Global Esports' ability to top off the health bars. Ken Mohororo dying is a bit of a tough break, but Jupiter are rotating into ultimates, and they're getting more kills than Global Esports anyway. So this has ultimately worked out very nicely for them. As we round out 85%, they walk away holding on to the point, and now with more ultimates.
There's also a risk here of being kind of stagnant. He managed to get a kill on Claire, which is going to help things out a little bit. I think. Oh, no, he is going to get staggered eventually.
Yeah, a little
97% though. This is kind of the end game now for Jupiter. Global Esports is trying to stagger.
Yeah, Azure was trying to get into position to ensure that they could hold on to the points potentially and had sound barrier, so, or nearly did at least. Now Sachok is dead and Global Esports are just really in disarray. Charge in does get avoided, so nice reaction there, and sound barrier is there now from Azure as Xenofly loses the mech. Jupiter still on the front foot in this fight, and the kills continue to go their way. Global Esports, last vestiges of resistance on the point, not quite going to get in time with the Wrecking Ball, and that does mean that Jupiter will pick up Gardens.
Well, you see the tempo swing happening as towards the middle of that map. Again, Claire gets the double environmental kill on the against Global Esports. That really just resets the pacing for Global Esports attack on that cap entirely. They had an advantage there, a super quick charge on the second Earth Shatter. When there wasn't anything really to respond from Jupiter's side, no defensive ultimates available just yet. Samurai D still far away. Ken Mohororo still needed time, and the time was bought for the team when Claire made the play, when Global Esports were fully reset.
Kenma Hororo also really showing his caliber there. Walked away from that first fight about 20% behind Lil Rax and Ultimate Charge. By the time that next fight actually happened, he was leading by 20%.
And that's something we've seen a lot out of Kenma Hororo across the couple of weeks now. This is obviously the third match and third week for him, and so far pretty consistent play.
So speaking of consistency, let's see if Global Esports can get another hot fight in this opening skirmish. This time Jupiter aren't just going to let Global Esports move in aggressively. They actually made the first move in, but now it's Global Esports' turn. This time no quick casualties. Both teams a little entrenched here.
This is where the speed boosts have been used. Points about to unlock. Global Esports have control so far, and Jupiter are going to need to make a move. They need to get on top of this cap and prevent it from going over.
Thing is, you don't mind having to move forward to do it. You like to get that momentum behind you with the 3-3, and they actually isolate Satchok as well. That's what you can do when you're charging inward. You can isolate members. It's exactly what happened to Jupiter on Gardens, and now they are doing it to Global Esports on Control Center.
This is where a lot of the extra ult charge does get built as well. Nearly on the Graviton Surge for Kenma Hororo, even uses it now.
Yeah, it might not have been necessary, but when you consider all the other ultimates about to come up online for them, that's one they're happy to toss in to ensure they secure this opening fight and cap the point.
And it's just a clean fight win as well. They want to cap the point early. They want to make sure they can charge some of the other ultimates, and they need to make sure that Global Esports gets fully cleaned up. This way, without losing any members for Jupiter, they get to initiate the spawn cap now, control this chokehold, and Global Esports will struggle to break through.
And that's why it's so important to get that opening skirmish on Control Center. More than any other map of Lijiang Tower, arguably. There's an early grab out from Lil Rax. Shadow didn't get too much from Samurai D. A lot of support ultimates tossed out to try and keep people topped off, and Satchok was able to charge Anakin back in towards their spawn, so Jupiter rightly have to back off from this position.
Yeah, Jupiter just need to make sure they can get Anakin back into action, regroup as 6 here, use the next ultimates coming up online. Kenma Hororo close to the grab again. Just has to make sure as well the cap doesn't go over yet.
Also has to make sure he survives, because Ryu's the mech. Now Kenma Hororo goes down as he was throwing the grab out. That means there's no follow-up for it. That was really tough, especially when you consider if they wanted to commit when they saw themselves getting low, they did have a sound barrier that they chose not to use.
The other problem is they committed without Anakin just yet, and they were concerned about losing the cap. And at this sort of stage in the game, where you do have some ultimates coming up online, losing the cap and also losing the fight is much worse than losing the cap and getting a much better fight. So maybe if they were a little bit more patient, that could have got a better way for them.
Now Global Esports in this position that they were themselves in, or rather the Jupiter were in a moment ago. Early kill on Satchok, though, means that ultimate advantage Global Esports has suddenly doesn't matter, and Jupiter just start out fragging. They kind of throw Global Esports for a loop, and Global Esports didn't quite react fast enough. Very nicely done by Jupiter.
And to be honest, this was a much more efficient win for Jupiter than what it was for Global Esports, who are currently still in this, actually.
Self-destruct gets tossed out by Xenofly, and it actually pays off as well. That was mostly just to try and preserve his life, because he was isolated, and suddenly Global Esports bounced back entirely. I don't think Jupiter were expecting Global Esports to push back in the fight that quickly.
Well, that's the thing. Jupiter actually had a slight player advantage. Satchok went down super early, but Jupiter never got a conversion. They never really cleaned up extra members, so they couldn't maintain that.
Now this is an overextension on the Global Esports side. You saw Lil Rax got super low there. Nice charging on Xenofly. This time he does not have a self-destruct. Now Satchok as well. And this is Global Esports just making the same mistake that Jupiter did, where they didn't realize how quickly that respawn would come into play.
And Jupiter now just need to slow down this game a little bit. They got a little bit of a deficit to catch up on as well in terms of actual progress. Have the grab to work with. Wouldn't get countered out by Xeon Flux as well. Global Esports in position to make a breakout.
If Jupiter can land these ultimates, though, even if they just get a good self-destruct grab combo, they are in a potentially winnable position. And that grab's so impactful in this choke point here. They throw it down onto Satchok, and there predictably is the Transcendence, followed by the self-destruct. Doesn't get anything this time, but they're still able to finish off Satchok. Traded back with Anakin, but that's not really an even trade. It still favors Jupiter right now, and with the sound barrier available, Transcendence from Sabagod, even if they need it, which they may just not at this point. Global Esports still trying to brawl their way out of this chokehold.
Waiting for time now, 80% and counting for Jupiter so far. They still have members alive, and Global Esports need to make some distance here. Force the fight onto the actual cap itself. use that Ursula that they have, because for Jupiter, they've basically run dry.
It was a very slick retreat from Jupiter, though, as they ran out to get back to the point without losing members. Unfortunately, though, on the point, now they start to lose members. Anakin, Samurai D, Ryu is out of the mech, and Claire going to drop as well. So Global Esports have bought themselves another opportunity to close out this map. They're going to need to make a big defense happen, though.
And this is where Jupiter have one attempt as well. Both teams are likely to reach that 99% mark here. Should be overtime ticking in soon. And Jupiter have just the grab so far. They're about to get an Earth Shatter as well. They need a lot more. And for Global Esports, they have to quickly get those defensive ultimates up online. Looking at Xeon Flux here.
That's the thing. For how good Kenma Hororo's ultimate charge has been, Xeon Flux has kept pace, and that's what matters more than anything else for Global Esports. Having a tool against that grab, considering its immense uptime, and now here they come in for that final fight. Just muscling Global Esports off the point for now.
Looking for a little bit of space, and that does come out the grab, as does the Transcendence.
Yeah, both teams getting very aggressive. It's an Earth Shatter straight to Satchok's shield. Self-destruct led beautifully from Xenofly. It's only a 1 for 2 in response from Jupiter, and it only gets worse from there. Global Esports have the staying power in this fight, largely off the back of that sound barrier, but that's to say nothing of the kills they were able to get that Jupiter were not. We find ourselves now tied up on Lijiang Tower.
And what was a pretty close control center as well. Overall, you'd have to say 1-1 in terms of this control map. Both sides have been trading equal blows. This was a pretty important fight for Global Esports and Jupiter. Very important opening kill that gets them to 6v5. But note how after this, Global Esports still do have members. They kind of still at the point with 5 members. Wait for Satchok to get back in. Jupiter are not prepared for that. And then suddenly, in the neutral 6v6, Global Esports take it out.
Very interesting pace of play throughout Control Center there. Very non-stop. Both teams really just throwing themselves at the walls, do anything to get an upper hand. Constantly shuffling back and forth. Now onto Night Market. Could still be anyone's map.
And it's just both teams in equal weight class as well. No DPSs on Lijiang so far. Very early movements by Jupiter, though. You can see the space they're taking.
Yeah, similar to what they were able to do on Control Center, but now here is that counter push from Global Esports as Jupiter have to start ceding space. Anakin nearly gets taken out. Huge charge on Little Rax as well is going to be something that Jupiter have to answer.
And I think this is where for Jupiter, you do have to be careful. If you get super aggressive at the start, you do risk some members maybe being caught out of position on your own team.
Good rotation, though, to get onto the point. Forces Global Esports to be the aggressor in this situation. That's not the sort of 1-for-1 you want, but that's more like it, getting Satchok in response to Samurai D. And now everything's all even Stevens with the mechs out the picture, but Xenofly's about to get his back Azure! Gets 3, and that's right as Xenofly's mech comes back. That was absolutely gorgeous.
And if it wasn't for that, the ultimates were starting to come online for Global Esports as well. Look at Lil Rax here, look at Satchok, they're further ahead against their counterparts you'd expect for Global Esports. If it wasn't for the triple kill on the boop, suddenly Global Esports start throwing ults in your face and they would probably win regardless. But now it gets a little bit worse for Jupiter because ults are still coming up online, except it's happening while the cap is ticking up.
That's the thing, they've got a little bit of catching up to do, but they were able to do it in the past. Nice shatter to thread past that shield. They already got Kenma Hororo though. Now Lil Rags in full retreat. Sabagod did have to pop the Transcendence, but Jupiter still have a lot to go on here.
That's a huge value Transcendence as well. Uses it against both the Graviton Surge and an Earth Shatter, both of which really got nothing done. Global Esports backing up all the way to the point.
Here's Kenma Hororo's grab available, just looking for the angle in. Wants to avoid that defensive matrix. They've actually just muscled Global Esports off the point, just with the threat of ultimates, and Global choose to answer with a preemptive double defensive ultimate now actually. Xenofly still loses the mech, gets finished off. Good kill on Samurai D, but it's ultimately starting to slide the way of Jupiter, who have also played more efficiently with their ultimates. Sabagod has already got another Transcendence available.
And this is where for Global Esports, unfortunately, right at the start of this engagement, you saw 2 ultimates, big ones, being used at the same time, Graviton Surge and Earth Shatter, and both were countered up by 1 Transcendence. Neither of those ults really got kills, and if Global Esports had a 6v5 scenario to work with, they maybe can win this. Just an unfortunate way for them to end up losing this cap.
Now Jupiter, like I said, with those ultimates available, Global Esports coming up on some very high impact tools, notably the grab and the shatter, but knowing Kenma Hororo, he will have that grab in short order of his own.
Global Esports just need a little bit of time here to get the important ones. And Jupiter, I mean, they're looking to get aggressive. You can start seeing them move out.
It's a bit of an early shatter there and a little bit too far away from Global Esports to mean much. So now actually Global Esports are the ones coming in with an advantage, but Kenma Hororo still overtakes Lil Rax in ultimate charge. Doesn't actually throw it out just yet.
It's a good bait on the Transcendence now. Just want to wait it out, use the Shatter.
And here's that grab as well from Little Rax. They don't even need the Shadow at this rate. Xenofly does go down in a counter trade, but unfortunately it's only the 1 for 3 in favor of Global Esports. Percentage on the point, roughly even as Global Esports regain control.
This is very much looking like Control Center. Back and forth action. One team will take the cap, then lose it straight away. The other team will then start getting a bit of progress. Both teams very evenly matched, like you said here. And we're looking at the ultimate scenario as well. Pretty even across the board as well. It's just a little bit different in terms of who actually has them. Kemo Hororo has a grab, but it's Satchok that has the Earth Shatter. Global Esports looking like they're in a better position for this specific fight.
And one of the big things that Global Esports have going for them is that double support ultimates. Jupiter don't even have one just yet. Oh, and what a massive counter shatter. Stops the self-destructing mech as well. That is about as flawless as it can get, considering that they only had to use one support ultimate as well, and might have not even needed it when push comes to shove. Now, Jupiter going in with very little to work with.
Look at Little Rex as well, getting a lot of ult charge. Jupiter don't have too much to work with here. Time is running out nearly into the overtime.
Savagod's nearly got himself a Transcendence. Will have it as this grab comes out. That's going to be critical. He can hold it on for a little bit. Now has to commit it as the sound barrier is also there for Global. Shatter is in. Just staying alive for the last stretches of that Transcendence, but it's not enough to save that Reinhardt. And that counter trade on Xeon Flux is not ideal. Self-destruct laying up from Xenofly finds only Ryu's mech, but it's still enough to keep the numbers sliding in GE's favor. Now Jupiter, last-ditch counter-attack with the grab, and it's actually paying off. They finished off Satchok. Kenma Hororo down to Samurai D, trying to come back in with the Shatter. There it is, on to a whole gamut of members. Xenofly, the only one not caught, and only just barely getting back in the mech that may have just rescued the fight for Jupiter.
You still have members alive for Jupiter as well. Global Esports trying to stream back in there, but they're losing far too many. Gonna have to see this one. 61% still available for Jupiter, and they are able to continue holding, or at least they should be.
I mean, Global Esports aren't going to give it up without a fight. Satchok nearly turning it back around, but he is going to go down, and with the re-entry of Kenma Hororo, he comes in hot as a comet on this one, and already looking to get that ultimate charge back up. Needs to make a lot of room to catch up to Little Rax. Global Esports have started stalling out a bit too much. All they're doing now is feeding new ult charge to Jupiter.
Yeah, they've already used the sound barrier as you'll use it just to stay alive. Use it on 2 members as well. More Global Esports members now realizing the fight is for naught. The point was, or rather now has already been capped. They've already got 99% for themselves as well.
Huge.
And this is about the point where for Global Esports, still waiting for members to come back in. Jupiter in this time have charged up nearly 5 ultimates.
And that's how Kenma Hororo catches up. He was at 43% when Little Rax got his charged up. Now only 10% away, just a little bit over that, from getting his own grab. Jupiter in a really healthy position here.
And Jupiter should be looking to close this one out. I mean, I said the same thing for Global Esports, but really, looking at 5 ults versus about 3, Global Esports would have to pull out a great win here.
Shatter from Satchok is not a hot one either. Grab is there. Oh, Kenma Hororo's grab got eaten. That's very critical. Self-destruct from Ryu. Finishes off Satchok and the charge in onto Bubble Kitty. Jupiter, cool, calm, and collected coming into this final fight. They will not let this 99-99 fall the way of Global Esports. They will secure out Night Market, and with that, they will be securing Lijiang Tower in a few short moments to start off the series 1-0.
And to be quite honest here, this could have gone either way. You see how tight those final moments were on this particular map, but you also did see eventually for Global Esports, a little bit of the greed coming out towards the end there. Wasn't able to just cede the point away and say, look, we actually got a huge lead here, 99% to 61. We can afford to lose the fight, come back in, not feed away too many ultimates, and still win. Because they didn't recognize that, because they threw extra ults, extra members in, it was just a little bit too much. Gave Jupiter, unfortunately, a little bit too much to work with to secure Lijiang.
And I think one of the understated parts of that is you give the Zarya not just time to be charging up the ultimate, but actually time to charge up the damage. When you're throwing more things in, the Zarya just keeps putting shields up. They ended up at a point where coming into the final fight, Kenma Hororo is still hovering around 80 charge. Their own Zarya, Lil Rax, is coming in effectively cold despite having that grab. And I mean, that was only one part of the overall endemic problem there. But very, very close. That's the thing we've got to revisit. And I think that speaks volumes about how close these two teams are on the whole.
And to be fair as well, Global Esports were definitely in a position to close out. They just couldn't really do that. And that kind of sort of speaks to the story of how they played previous matches as well. You got to look at that reverse sweep from last week and say, yeah, they were in position to close out in terms of a full series.
But never
didn't quite happen. Now we are looking at a week 3 scenario where, for the first time so far this season, Global Esports do not start with a lead in the series. They start 0-1. Jupiter have the lead.
And that does mean they need to ideally get one back coming into our next map, which will be Eichenwalde. I'm not sure at this point if we are going to see a super close series in terms of the overall map score, and that kind of worries me. The reason I say that is because Jupiter are a team that tend to accelerate away, especially if they come in with quite a hot start. They're quite a hard team to reverse sweep out. Even when you get 2 maps back off them, they're a team notorious for still winning it on the 5th one. They don't get reverse swept themselves. And that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly does, and now Global Esports have to consider where the momentum in this particular matchup is. You also have a really good feel for now the 3-3 Ghost mirror between both the teams. They've had 3 full rounds of Lijiang where basically no one swapped there. You could kind of count, okay, yeah, there was a Doomfist towards the end, but that was really a desperation play, so I don't know if you really want to look into that one. Basically, it was just a mirror for all 3 rounds, and you have to say, based on the mirror so far, it's still reasonably hard to call because on Lijiang is one thing, going onto Eichenwalde and other maps, it's a completely different arena here. Both teams so far trading blows like you'd expect on a bit of a mirror matchup here. The only real discrepancy is, again, just the decision-making for Global Esports at the end of night market that kind of cost them the series.
I mean, that's all to say nothing of potential other compositions they could still pull out. We mentioned it at the top of the night with the maps that we have in play. Lijiang Tower is the one where we're most likely to see a bunch of 3-3, and even then aren't always. As we come into other maps, look, these guys could just both play 3-3 all night long. I'm definitely not discounting that possibility, but we do tend to see quite a little bit more variance. What we are going to be seeing next, of course, speaking of variance, is hybrids. Let's go ahead and find out how that works.
Welcome to Eichenwalde. This is hybrid. 2 teams face off as either defenders or attackers. The attacking team has a limited amount of time to first capture a payload and then escort it along a set path containing 2 checkpoints. To capture the payload, the attackers need to stand within its range for a set amount of time. Defenders can delay capture progress by also standing in range. The attackers must work together to clear away the defenders. If successful, they score 1 point and gain additional time on the clock. The payload only moves forward when an attacker stands near it. Defenders can delay the payload's movement by standing nearby. To get moving again, the attackers must clear away the defenders by force. If even one attacker is capturing the objective or on the payload when the time runs out, the game enters overtime. This extends play indefinitely until the attackers are either cleared away or they gain more time by reaching a checkpoint. Every time the payload reaches a checkpoint, the attackers score 1 point and gain additional time on the clock. The round ends when the payload reaches the destination or when time runs out. Teams switch sides each round. Whichever team scores the most points and escorts the payload farthest wins.
So here we are, back onto Eichenwalde as well. Jupiter in the lead here, not by too much. It's 1 match, or rather 1 map, 2-1 score. Global Esports definitely in a position where they're very likely to come back here and get this one. And we're going to be at 1-1 apiece into the break. Kind of the expected result in a way. It would be a little strange to see Global Esports at 0-2.
And that's the thing, like, Lijiang Tower there was a close loss, and that's the good kind of loss. And I said earlier in the night, that's the kind of loss that Global Esports actually had against Nova MS last week. It's the good kind of loss. Only problem is, you don't want to only have the good kind of loss. You would also like to get some wins in there as well. And if that's going to be how it goes, then, well, Global Esports are going to need to pick up some maps, ideally starting now.
First thing you actually see is Global Esports on this defense, and usually for the defending team, the comp they reveal right now tends to be the one that's true, especially with 10 seconds remaining. It is actually going to be double DPS here. Lil Rex on the Ashe, Bubble Kitty on the fire.
And I really like this. I like how these two heroes can potentially synergize with each other, especially on a map like Eichenwalde on this first point defense. So we're going to have to see how Jupiter answer. They're going to open out with just a 3-3.
And honestly, when Jupiter see this, they have the opportunity to go back to spawn and change. Specifically, if they do want to play the 3-3, Samurai D kind of has to be the one on Winston instead of Ryan.
This is interesting. They've spotted it out, they've seen it, and they decide they want to make a change. They actually need to make sure they get back to spawn. Bubble Kitty knows exactly where to shoot the rockets when Jupiter are moving through that door.
And to be quite, to be fair as well, it's a lot of early damage for Bubble Kitty, 37% charged already. And Jupiter haven't really made any ground. They've made that swap now onto the Winston as they're starting to get back onto A, but Bubble Kitty's nearly halfway, so he's got a lot of extra momentum himself.
That's the thing, that's something you just have to kind of accept when you're going to make that compositional swap. And you do need to make that swap as well. So now they get to make a real approach. Nice sleep actually onto Xenofly as they look to keep the pressure up on this high ground while they chip away at the point. It's already 1/3 earned for Jupiter, but now some members starting to get a little bit low. This is where the damage really mounts, but they demech Xenofly and none of these kills have quite been completed.
Watch the barrage as well. That's where Global Esports really have to do something. Sleep Dart, I believe, does land as well, so puts that one down very quick.
And this is, honestly, the turnaround the Global Esports really need here. Jupiter not necessarily out of this fight yet, especially with Xeon Flux going down, and when you consider Jupiter have a closer respawn, but now Bob out on the point, and Jupiter are finding it harder and harder to maintain presence here.
The part they really needed to succeed in is get Bubble Kitty down. They managed to get the sleep up, but they couldn't really secure the kill. So for Global Esports, just still maintaining the important members. Both Lil Rex and Bubble Kitty still had a lot of impact there, despite the barrage not doing a lot, despite Bob realistically not doing too much either. It is a big deterrent, and for Jupiter, enough of a deterrent for them to go back to spawn and force a reset.
This is a good position now for Global Esports. They're kind of weathered the worst of it and can just rotate back through a chunk of ultimates now. Jupiter's still a little ways away.
We're kind of back in the same position here. Nano does come through from Sabagod. He's going to secure a kill on Xeon Flux.
That's a really important one, and even finding Lil Rax, 2 very important kills now. Xeon Flux off the table means no nano boost in response. So now Global Esports are going to throw everything else they've got. Rez is there on Xeon Flux. They can get that one back in the picture. But unfortunately, Xenofly died, so they're still not at a numbers advantage. It's going to have to be the ultimate out of Bubble Kitty. He's low, he goes down, nicely finished off by Sabagod, and off the back of that, Jupiter should have no trouble finishing this cap.
You can see that pressure from Jupiter as well, just not really letting off the gas pedal on their re-approach. In fact, not even now, just cleaning up the final kill into Lil Rax, but putting a lot of pressure specifically on top of Bubble Kitty, knowing that the barrage was probably going to come through. If Bubble Kitty's too low, he's not going to be able to really use that ultimate. And on top of that, Global Esports were already down on members, so in a really tough spot, Jupiter finally get the cap and are finally on their way through to B.
All right, now, this is where Global Esports, big swap.
Back to Lee Jung, I think.
Yeah, and that means Jupiter come in with an ultimate advantage.
And Kemohororo being the driver of that, with that Graviton Surge as well. Global Esports have to be the ones to approach. They have to be the ones to step on the card and force this fight. And when they do, the Grav will come out.
Thing is, it's such a total reset as well. It's not even like they held on to a support ultimate or anything. So Xeon Flux, he's charging that up very quickly, but might not be quick enough because there's that grab coming out onto the cart. Now they just need to get into the thick of it and start finishing off.
Not a lot of damage.
Taking a bit of time though, and this gives Global Esports a chance to maybe counterattack Jupiter, though they're not going to stop. They're going to continue pressing forward. Nice charge off, but it's going to be both right now. It's going down for that trouble, and Jupiter are going to clean up the rest of the fight on the high ground.
Yeah, and for Satchok, he's probably going to go down there anyway, so take a member with him. But what is strange for Jupiter is they didn't really win the fight in the Grav. They won the fight after the Grav in the Aftermath battle, and for Jupiter as well, just the opening damage on the Grav was so poor from the team. You really have to readdress that one. Still does get the win regardless, and now Global Esports in position to counterattack with their ults.
Jupiter... Kemohororo has nearly lapped Lil Rax. In fact, he's just done so now, technically speaking, and Jupiter aren't too far behind on a lot of these other ultimates, so they're actually still in a pretty good spot.
Global Esports should feel a little bit more confident, though. They are in a better spot than they were last fight, in a more defendable spot as well, closer to their own respawn. This is where they can really draw up the game. Have to watch for the HP, though. Satchok took a lot of damage.
Yeah. This is going to be the self-destruct thrown forward to try and find something to open it out with. Very quick transcendence out of both Zenyatta's, neither in reaction to a grab. So Kemohororo leading in that grab charge gets to commit is now largely answered by a sound barrier, but it's not enough. Oh, beautiful. Lil Rax gets eaten, or at least the grab does. Xenofly self-destruct, trades a couple back, but Jupiter still on the front foot here and not willing to relent just yet. But now with Satchok picking up a couple, and Xenofly rallying very quickly. It looks like this team has got life in them yet. Now it's Jupiter slowly getting picked apart, slowly isolated on the point, not quite going to finish off that cap yet.
And it's the self-destruct kills that can really save fights for teams as well. Global Esports has started to go so wrong. You can see the difference in a little bit of extra ultimate charge for one of the Zaryas compared to the other one, Kemohororo, because he just gets a little bit earlier, puts Global Esports in such a weird position. Lorex finally gets his grab out, but in a very risky place, ends up having it eaten, and that fight gets saved when the self-destruct kills come through, and then Global Esports can finally make that counterpunch. Now with less than 1 minute remaining, Jupiter have a really long run back distance.
And they've also not got much of an advantage. In fact, they don't have an advantage at all is what I really mean when I say that. Global Esports are just coming in with the ultimate lead across the board. This is going to be a tough fight for Jupiter.
And also a really great place to defend as well. This bridge can really open up a lot of options. 3 ults now. Global Esports should really be looking to press. They don't want to wait too long, otherwise members like Sabagot are going to have Transcendence available. You know Kemohororo is no slouch on the charge either, so just don't really want to give him the opportunity to find that.
Thing is, Jupiter are actually hanging back. Global Esports don't mind it because it keeps Jupiter away from the car, but Jupiter are going, come to us, go on, press forward. There's the grab. Nice cut off on Xenofly. His own self-destruct does find Claire, and that is something. Shatter is decent, but it's largely saved out by the Transcendence still running from Xeon Flux. Satchok Low, though, will not be able to retreat. Now the rest of the team trying to pull back. Not all of them going to be able to achieve that as Azure picks off, and now Jupiter back on the cart with a numbers advantage.
And this is where Global Esports just need some more members, but they don't have enough. Looks like it is going to be a cap here. A few members just going to try and sort out this card as much as they can.
Nice catch on Sabagot. Xeon Flux picks up a second one. That might be the beginning of a rescue, but with Little Rax out of the picture, it looks like it's just going to be a brief little 1-off or 2-off rather.
Sound barrier, good.
They're committing a lot now as Azure finds one as well. These supports are going to put the team on their back, so help them. Jupiter, self-destruct laid up. Azure finds another one, and this time it's on Kemohororo, who was super close to a grab. Global have a closer respawn. Xeon Flux and Azure just saved that defense for Global Esports.
And you can see it right there, Global Esports just piling back on. They were trying to do the same thing as Night Market, except this is the version that works. This is the version where they're heavily favored. They're much closer in terms of respawn distance. Overtime matters as well. Slower respawns. Jupiter have such a long run back distance, they can't get back to the point on time. Being able to stall out, Sound Barrier catches 4 members in a desperation moment instead of just the 2 that we saw in Night Market. It's a huge difference. On top of that, Azure gets a lot of environmental kills.
I mean, that's the real killer, isn't it? Look, it's great for Xeon Flux to get 2 as the Zenyatta, but it's getting environmental kills on targets like Kemohororo that the supports will otherwise struggle to kill. That is so huge. You see that playing out here. Jupiter are still in a great position here. They eat Little Rax's grab. They kill Xeon Flux. This was that sound barrier. And now they start to slowly but surely turn things back around as the start gets so terrible. It's the double from Xenofly. That gives them an opportunity, and then we start to see the supports really kick into gear.
And this is where you need to see players like Lil Rex be able to get that charge in there as well. As Kemohororo does have the Graviton Surge, it was about 80-ish% for Lil Rex, so just a little bit too far behind. Cart does make its way towards the end of B, not quite capping that one out, so Jupiter have still a defendable position, but the line has been drawn in the sand here. Jupiter need a very good defense to make sure Global Esports do not cap out the map.
That was really not the sort of progress Jupiter were hoping to get there. Like you said, this is still a very defensible situation. Could achieve something like a full hold, or if indeed they can make this first hold last a long time, they set themselves up well for the streets phase.
What you do also see out of Jupiter is a lot of GOATS discipline, which is to say they want to force the 3-3 comp whenever they can. Global Esports are not going to try anything funny here, just going to respond to the way they the best way they know how, which is to mirror that composition.
Can't blame them, but ain't broke, don't fix it. And it did actually work for them on the defense as well, even if it didn't quite work on the Zhang Tower.
Well, Xeon Flux getting really chunked out to start with is not the greatest start for Global Esports.
They still press in though, and are starting to force Jupiter back. Here comes the damage in, but unfortunately Satchok a bit too far forward. Traded back though, paid back double in fact. This is still potentially anyone's fight.
There's a lot of members that Global Esports are picking up here. Decent amount of counter trades, but only 2 alive for Jupiter means probably not going to be a defense.
Yeah, not anyone's fight anymore with that extra couple there coming through, especially the pick on Kemohororo. Suddenly Jupiter's ability to really deal damage got taken out from underneath them, and very quickly it becomes Global Esports' fight.
And because it's a 1 attempt as well, they got so much time to work with on B, and they don't even really need a cap out, but they need a cap out basically all of B except for the actual part where you go on to see.
It's about 1 meter.
Yeah, something like that. So for Jupiter Esports, I mean, trying to get back onto the card, but already losing Ken.
I do respect the early fight, though. They are aware that they need to get a lot of time off the clock. And despite the early loss of Ken, they've actually done well in this fight. They have largely caught Global Esports with their pants down. The Shatter is good, though. It finishes off Ryu's mech. Transcendence comes in, matched by Xeon Flux. So now we've got both teams just choosing to slog it out in the cart, and that means Jupiter are going to have to pull back, give the space.
Eyes on the Zarya players as well here. Lil Rex is really getting towards that Graviton Surge here. Kemahororo's not that far behind, but notably, both teams do not have Transcendence, so looking for a lot of damage output. Both Lucio players will also be very pressured to use the sound barriers.
That's the thing, it's not quite as effective a counter if you've got the big damage, and Jupiter do have more ultimates that they would be rotating into. First grab comes out from Lil Rax, no quick follow-up. Second one could come out from Kemahororo, but they're being very disciplined. Oh, that's a bump off from Samurai D. He's going to go over the edge. Bubble Kitty, though, also gets environmentally killed. Self-destruct layered up, doesn't quite find anyone. But Global Esports do have the rug pulled out from underneath them here. Now as Xeno fly down, you see the shift in the wind. Azure has started using the speed boost to get people out of the fight. Here's the turnaround, though, with the Shatter as they look to get back in. Transcendence later as well, and a huge one on Ken Mahororo. And that's going to be Jupiter broken on the bridge.
Azure is just hunter killer on this map so far. He's been involved in so many of these frags, and now Jupiter definitely on the back foot. No ultimates to play with. Global Esports on the precipice of just capping this one through, and Jupiter in rough spots.
Enemy at the gates right now, just looking to storm on up. Jupiter need to get on this. Ryu is going to be the first to get there, and that does mean he is something of a sacrificial lamb. Nice Transcendence to keep them in the fight. It is now a pitched 6 versus 6. Double rally. Sounded like surround sound right there. Got that Dolby Digital for you. Nice charge in. Doesn't quite finish your zero, though. Really got caught in it. First grab from Lil Rax, and very big conversion. Ken Mahororo is still alive. He does have a grab, but he is a man alone as soon as Claire gets picked off. In fact, Claire is finally going to go down. It looked like Ken might die before Claire, but doesn't matter if he had the grab. They did not have presence on the cart anymore. Global Esports really picking up the pace.
Yeah, and very few attempts as well. Again, 1 attempt onto A, about 2 to 3 attempts onto B, a couple of lost fights there, a couple of really hotly contested fights by Jupiter, but Jupiter never really felt like they had any standing there on that B defense or across the entirety of their defense on Iconvolda. Attack was a little bit sloppy by them as well, ultimately held out on B by Global Esports. So across the whole of Iconvolda, you got to say this is a very favored map for Global Esports versus Lijiang compared to what we saw on Lijiang.
That was one of those maps that felt like it could have gone very differently if a few things had have gone different ways, right? Like, you look at how Jupiter started off their attack, actually. They were in a position to have a very high momentum push. Global Esports managed it all quite well, but you'd also dare say that Jupiter did mismanage a couple of things here and there. And, you know, it's maybe just Azure not getting environmental kills in any one of those fights, and suddenly Jupiter have capped. Suddenly we're in a very different scenario, and then same again on the defense. But when it all played out as it did so consistently, you've really just got to say Global Esports outclassed Jupiter there.
Yeah, and I think specifically on A, that's where you have the biggest discrepancy. B was a bit of a different story. It's kind of, that's more of the 3-3 mirror that we've seen across Lijiang, which still was very competitive across both sides. But specifically on A, that kind of leads into B. Because it was a 1 attempt push by Global Esports on their A, they had so much more momentum going on to B, which is why Jupiter was so far behind for most of the B defense. Whereas you look at the A offense for Jupiter instead, they wanted to go for it's actually, yeah, they wanted to go for the 3-3 goats, but that kind of DPS defense by Global Esports, despite losing eventually, held out for such a long time that it gave Global Esports a lot more ground to work with once it came to B.
And, I mean, we've been talking a lot when we've seen both of these teams. Indeed, when we've seen most of these teams this tournament so far, you know, team comp flexibility, stuff like that. Like, Jupiter should have it. Jupiter played in a pre-GOATS era. In fact, it was in that time that this 3-3 composition started making its way into this region of contenders. And they were proficient at that as well. So we know they've got that flexibility, but they never actually bring it out. Now, I don't mean to say they have to. They can totally choose not to. That's valid.
Yeah.
But Global Esports have dipped into other team compositions. They have demonstrated some flexibility, and it has paid off.
And I think that's a scary thing because you have teams like Jupiter who so far are very strict about what they want to play, but also at the same time, you have teams like Global Esports that not only can match Jupiter in that very disciplined 3-3 Goats mirror, but then if need be, they have the options available to go into other things, and not only that, but then prove they can win with it, because you do also have other teams where, to be quite fair, Jupiter could choose to go into other comps, but they might not be winning with them in the same fashion that Global Esports is.
The thing is just that slightly lower amount of flexibility that in the grand scheme of things can start to hurt a team.
And with that, we are going to be taking a bit of a break. We've reached the halfway point now, 1-1 apiece for both teams. When we do come back, the conclusion of this matchup, so don't go anywhere. We'll see you right after this.